We have with us this panel of very distinguished technologists and entrepreneurs. To my left is Anant Narayanan. He is the CEO of Myntra. Then we have Kunal Shah. He is the founder and CEO of FreeCharge. Gautam Sinha is the CEO and CTO of Times Internet. And we have Bejul Sumaya, who is the managing director of Lightspeed Venture Partners. So what we're going to do on the panel now is we're going to ask them to share their thoughts on some of the questions that I had raised and others' thoughts that they may have. And then we are going to turn it over to you. So Anant?
Sure. Can you hear me okay? This is working? Yeah. Okay, great.
Is that okay? Yeah.
Yeah. So Anant Narayanan, I think background for this is I spent about 15 years at McKinsey, leading various parts of the product development practice of McKinsey, where we did a lot of technology work across a range of sectors. And then over the last 7 months now at Myntra. Sorry, I'm just gonna.
Thank you.
Can you hear me okay? All right, perfect. Two pieces of context and background in terms of my comments. First is I spent about 15 years at McKinsey. I spent 3 of them in China, about 5 or 6 of them in India, leading the product development practice. And then over the last 7-8 months at Myntra, which is obviously very much into sort of the e-commerce, fashion, apparel space. So I think 2 or 3 thoughts just on India itself. My sense is I think India is at a little bit of the third revolution. You talked, Kumud, about IT and IT services. I think e-commerce is another one that I think is going to be one of these, that's an industry that's getting built. I'm not talking about which firm will do well, whether the economic model is good, the valuations are right. I think that's another panel. But I think just as a concept and a business, I think it's here to stay, and it's an industry that I think is going to get built in a very unique manner. I think there are a couple of things about technology and why technology will be important for this. The first, by the way, is just internet penetration. I think you have about 400 million internet users, about 300 million mobile internet users. I think India will be primarily a mobile internet market. It is, whether it's the app or the mobile web, again, technology will evolve, but it'll primarily be a mobile market. I think that's one trend. Therefore, as you think about technology, making that work is going to be important. The second is just how distributed India is in terms of just the commerce. More than 60% of our revenues come from tier 2 towns, where there is no physical infrastructure and access. Therefore, I think using technology and other things is going to be important to actually get access to them. I think I'm talking about commerce, but I think the same thing could be applied to many different things. So I think that's the second thing. So the first is really around mobile and pivoting around mobile. The second is really around how spread out India actually is. While there's lots of urbanization, there's still a very large rural economy, and that needs to actually be gotten to, and I think technology is going to be an important aspect of getting there. The third, I think, is just scale, and a lot of the problems, and I'll only speak from my experiences, and I'm sure other panelists have theirs, but I think a lot of problems are at such scale that they cannot be solved without technology. So I'll give you an example. At this point, we have probably about 8 million monthly active users. And we have about 200,000 odd SKUs, right, in terms of styles that we're dealing with. If you think about supply chain and supply chain planning, right, now this cannot be done actually with sort of simple supply chain planning. It's a very, very complex supply chain as you just think about inventory, service levels, and so on. So you need actually technology to be able to solve it. The same is true, I think, by the way, from everything from the front end, right? If you have to have a buyer, a traditional shopper stop buyer, actually is used to, something that grows at between 10 to 15% growth. We grow at 80%. They're used to adding about 8 to 10 brands a year. You now add 2 brands a day. So just the scale at which you have to operate is very different, and therefore you have to use technology as an enabler to do it. Then the last thing I'd say, and then I'll pass this on, is I also think technology is a little bit of an enabler for social change. I mean, one thing that's striking for me is I actually spent some time at our call center, and there are people who call from Namakkal in the south or from Jaipur or any of these small towns, and they buy Anthony Morato jeans or Replay jeans. I mean, this kind of access and knowledge, I think also it almost democratizes and the information democratizes what you can do, right? So I think the technology is actually enabling access to both information and lifestyles that were not available easily otherwise, which is the other reason why I think technology is actually fueling a lot of this as well. So I think just three different takes on it, and hopefully happy to sort of make this more of a dialogue.
Talking about India and technology, I think one interesting trend about India is that most people did not have a personal computing device not too long ago, did not use the internet or try internet. They're enjoying the basics of internet at this point of time. Social is big, porn is big, because it's just the first thing you'll observe that any economy that kind of gets to access is Bollywood is big, watching soap operas and other things is big, and they'll gradually move towards commerce. But one interesting trend about India, considering the age, the average age of this country, the 12 to 21-year-old in every family is now becoming the chief technology officer of the household. And the chief technology officer is actually taking the household forward. He's training the parents on how to use the phone, how to use WhatsApp groups and send pictures. And I'm sure you must have all been, even you are remotely there, you are still probably chief technology officers of your family over here. Interestingly, the chief technology officer is also becoming the chief procurement officer of the family because he understands technology, right? Or he or she understands technology. I think the interesting trend about that is that the current products that are there in India are not to the same quality level to some of the international products that the youth is exposed to, right? They know what Snapchat is or Facebook is or WhatsApp is. They can clearly make out if your app is not good enough in terms of design, in terms of quality, in terms of stability, and so on and so forth. So the Indian market is actually interesting, where the expectations are already world standard, right? The infrastructure is probably non-existent to most levels, but the consumer is already having, the viral videos are becoming popular in 24 hours of it being popular in US. They are behaving like a lot of American kids already because they watch the same kind of content, speak the same kind of language already, and that change is happening at the root level. One of the things that we are not realizing is that while the expectations are global, the infrastructure, the kind of companies, the kind of talent that exists is not able to match that, and therefore there is some kind of a heartburn. But interestingly, the consumers are buying, like apparel is a very interesting category. I believe it's in a society where I cannot still make very interesting jokes or witty comments, putting nice pictures is a great way of getting 200 likes. And I think apparel is kind of showing that kind of thing, where one interesting comment a young user of apparel told me is that my shelf life of same clothes is now shrunk to like 1 year or less, because I can't wear it again, because once I'm on social media wearing the same thing, I can't be seen wearing the same thing again. So it's interesting how some of these behaviors, especially in a socially, strong social country, is demonstrating, and how technology is enabling some of these things. So those are some of my thoughts.
First, let me start by saying that I agree to everything what has been said. I'll add a couple of points, and more as keywords, but come on later to define them more robustly. So if you look at all the panels that has happened over the last 2 days, and see, can technology help them? Whether it's women empowerment, whether it's LGBT, whether it's e-governance, whether it's healthcare, the term that will come, and it has been talked before, is the enabler. Technology acts as an enabler to anything that we have discussed. It's not a goal in itself, but it helps any social cause, it helps any business cause, it helps, practically whatever you are trying to do. Just to, explain my background, I work for Times Internet as the Chief Operating Officer and Group CTO. Times Internet is part of Times of India, which did its first publication in November 3rd, 1838. So about 178 years old as a company. Today, Times Internet runs more than 30 digital brands spread across news and content. You probably know some of them: timesofindia.com, Economic Times, Navbharat Times, Maharashtra Times, Mumbai Mirror, Vijay Karnataka, and so on. A lot of specialty content in spirituality, which is Speaking Tree, IDEVA, Men's XP, A lot of global partnerships, which is HuffingtonPost.in, Uber in India, Coursera, Business Insider, and so on. We do a lot of classifieds, which is Magic Bricks, Times Jobs, Simply Mary, and some of our new properties are in entertainment, which is Ghana, Box TV, What's Hot, Filmy Pop, and so on. The point I'm trying to make is every company wants to go for attention. So with all these, we reach about 150 million unique users every month, spending little more than 13 billion minutes across our properties, which is pretty significant to what we touch as part of the Indian audience. But we still don't have the audience attention to the level that we want. So across all our properties, the time spent is about 80 minutes over a month per unique user, if I just use basic maths. If you compare it to a US consumer, they spend, and if you take some of the tasks are done in parallel, the average day is about 32 hours, not 24 hours. Then amount of time a person spends on consumer tech is about 11 hours, which is between television, radio, all the social network, and so on, which is a huge number that anyone aspires to get attention to the users that is there. But I'll introduce another word, which is called compressed timeline. So one of the things which you'd see, which technology has done. So let's say the first 1,000 PCs that came in 5 years, the next 1,000 would come in 2 years. Same case with mobile phones. So as anything happens, technology is the primary enabler to compressing the timeline in which we communicate, in which we learn. So if you want to do a degree or a course, which is probably a PhD level course, you can still do that as a high school student today because it's available, over the internet for you to learn. And lots of people are trying to do that. So with the notion of compressed timeline, with the notion of enabler, I'll give it to Bejal for his comments. Yeah.
Thanks. Just a couple of thoughts. It's tough going at the end because you guys have already said everything. But just, by way of analogy, when China went from about 90 million internet users, I think in 2005, to roughly 500 million internet users in 2013, approximately $450 billion of market value was created. And I really believe that, whether it's over the next 5 years or 10 years, we're going to see something similar in India as the digital economy gets built out. So just as the last 10 years, we would talk about the physical infrastructure in India and all the investment that went into physical infrastructure in roads and in ports and in power plants, I think the next 10 years is really going to be about the digital infrastructure and the digital economy getting built out. And I think that in a country like India, the digital economy really can dwarf the physical economy because a lot of traditional industries aren't fully formed. Right? So when the internet turned up in the US, organized retail was already pretty good. There's a Nordstrom down the road, whatever it is, right? In India, the internet has come along and organized retail doesn't exist, right? So it's a little bit like the analogy of wireless to the landline. And I think internet-driven business models will deliver companies that are significantly larger than their offline peers. So that's one thought. The second, and I've been investing in India for the last 8 years, is just the scale, the pace at which this happened. For the first 5 or 6 years, from 2000 really up until 2011, 2012, so like, when is this going to happen? And then it just took off. And why did it take off? It's been mentioned. It's the private sector and it's mobile. When I went back to India in 2005, there were 13 million landline connect. Can't even call them broadband connections because they weren't broadband. But 13 million wired connections. That number today is about 18 million. Right. So the PC internet is stillborn in India. It's all mobile. And in that respect, India looks very different than the US and very different than China. And I think that's something that will play out over the next 10 years or so. And then just a final thought, which is, while we're all in the business of being optimistic, I think we also have to peel the onion back and say, what are all of these people doing online? Okay, we can talk about how many smartphones there are, we can talk about how many data connections there are, but what are they really doing? And when it comes down to it, what is that addressable market today? And this is more just so that we're all realistic, right? So, Anand, you probably have the most recent numbers, but maybe 20 to 30 million people have bought online, right? So you got to peel the onion back and say what's really happening, and we're at the front end of this curve. I don't doubt that adoption will continue to be rapid, but we're still very much at the nascent stages of this technology adoption curve.
So thank you. I think it's very clear that, we all see that the digital economy has taken off. I also think that several of us believe, for very good reasons, that technology will enable India to leapfrog in many ways. Very similar to how the cell phones helped us leapfrog the infrastructure limitations we had with landline. Already, if you look at mobile commerce, I think India is leading in the world. And then I think Gautam talked about the fact that this digital economy is not just about consumerism and their aspirations, but it's also addressing social issues in its wake, like women's emancipation. And certainly if you think about how technology equalizes access, you can begin to see how it will play a very big role in something like that. So with that, I will open it up to all of you for your questions. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Sai. My question was around the same topic. So we've talked about the good side of technology. In the US, we've seen a bit of the start of the digital inequality that we're talking about. And in India, inequality is already such a vast topic. How do you guys think about it? How do you think of that hurting or the political class coming in on that topic much earlier than it has here?
Yeah, so will technology exacerbate a digital divide? So thoughts?
I think we are probably, if you look at what, let's say, something like WhatsApp has done in the country, where information used to almost not exist at the ground level on many things. Now the communication is so seamless, right? Business, trade. I see small artists who actually put their designs of fabric kind of to the traders through the thing and getting the fair price because they do a group blast versus trying to go to one place to another thing. What I believe is that when it comes to inequality, I think we have inequality that exists in a big way right now, and I think technology will kind of get us there to kind of come to parity in terms of being able to, in a society where we can really have some say and know what's going on. I think in terms of, if you look at the whole, how the political agenda used to be driven before, where most people would be blindsided to more issues, right? Today, you look at role of social media in the last 2 elections, right? Right from making jokes on a politician to kind of exposing some of the things, it's happening at a speed that you cannot imagine. I think the society is kind of becoming a lot more robust in that way because information is not kind of kept in certain places. It just leaks. It's out there and transparent.
I mean, just perhaps to build on that and give a couple of examples, right? So recently, I'm from Chennai originally, right? And we had the Chennai floods that happened, which was just a disaster. What was amazing was that most volunteer work happened through Facebook groups and WhatsApp, right? And I think people did incredible things. So technology actually enabled it, right? So I think that, and by the way, the other thing that happened very quickly was that the fact that the government actually did not do much also became very transparent. It wouldn't have happened with mass media press, but it did happen very quickly. Now, I think your question though, so I think the easy answer is I think technology still helps when there's a lot of this that's happening. The difficult answer, I think the difficult question is there truly a digital divide and what's really happening, right? So I'll go a little bit to the rural sales that I was talking to you about, right? Kunal, I think your point of being an access for people in rural India to sell. So as we think about our rural market, it's not only a sales channel, but it's also a channel for people to be able to sell. Right? I mean, there are people who literally will have no access at all, who are now actually part of the digital economy because of what technology has happened. And the reason for that, by the way, is actually mobile technology. I think mobile technology and penetration, I think we have 1 billion registered numbers or something equivalent of that in India, right? And, with both post and prepaid, the cost of internet access continues to drop. And therefore, I think it will actually help. And I think India, by the way, already, both from a carrier, both from our telecom carriers and the cost of it to internet access continues to drop, right? So I think at least in the Indian context, even though, yes, there is a digital divide, I think it's better off than in many other places because of just all the innovation that's happening.
Let me go in the back. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Vinayak from McKinsey, actually. My question to you guys is, I believe all of you made some transition to the technology space from, in some cases, outside, from business, etc. What was your biggest learning and big shocks when you made that transition that opened your eyes into how to be successful?
I'm happy to go. Sure. I probably made the biggest transition of this group, probably. So I'll go. I used to be in automotive product development in McKinsey, and yes, we did a little bit of technology, and I've jumped fully into the digital world of m-commerce, right? So I think the biggest thing, by the way, is to think in scale of what technology can do. I think a lot of the times, the mindset of a more traditional problem-solving mindset is to solve things linearly, right? And what technology enables you to do is to solve these at significant scale in much shorter time. So the biggest learning for me over the last 6, 7, 8 months has been, how do you think differently? Because, what you think traditionally, just to give you an example, launching a brand, right? Launching a brand in the traditional world is a 9-month process, right? You get customer research, you get customer insights, you try and do, several different product prototypes, and you sort of launch. I think in the new world, you don't do that. You launch 10 different products, and you get A/B research, you get instant feedback, and you're able to sort of compress the 9 months to 15 days, right? It just changes the paradigm of how you think about it. So I think being able to think very differently about scale and time and what technology can enable is I think, one big shock. The second one, I'd love to hear you guys talk about it, is just getting technology and product management talent in the Indian context is very, very hard. And so, it's a great opportunity, but often you don't have the right people to go solve it. So you get all excited, and then you get deflated when you know that you don't find anybody. So I think, those were a couple of the things that at least I got.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Govardhan Topla. This question is about rich and poor disparity. So in the world, if you take 80 odd number of people own 90% of wealth in the world. So don't you guys think that the technology kind of empowered them to do business and gain this much amount of wealth and gain that much amount of wealth? So what is your thoughts on that?
So Kunal, you want to take that?
I think the VC should answer that.
I just want to make sure I've understood the question. So you're saying there is this inequality today, and if you can just repeat the question about what?
I mean, wealth disparity is there. So only few people can if technology was not there, it is very hard to handle that much wealth across the world. So doesn't technology kind of help them to
Doesn't
their business and do more profits?
so doesn't technology make the rich even richer?
I'll just answer it in a different way to understand this. If the rich could not get richer, our average lifespan would be probably 45 years, 50 years. We would have a lot more health issues, a lot more access issues, a lot more crime, a lot more other stuff, right? I think innovation and the incentive to innovate is what drives the human race forward. And that's what we need to understand.
Yeah, I just make maybe a different point around what's happening in India today. If you think about the wealth creation by entrepreneurs in the last 5 years, Sachin and Binny at Flipkart, Kunal at FreeCharge, Kunal at Snapdeal, Bhavesh at Ola. These are all middle-class young people that are now really driving the economy forward and creating significant wealth. So if anything, I think the data would suggest that the rise of a new industry is actually enabling people who don't come from wealthy backgrounds, who don't come from the Tatas and the Reliances and the Lancos and the Adanis, and don't have the political clout that those business houses have, to build large companies and create significant wealth in a period of time that didn't happen before. So if anything, I would argue the opposite.
Yeah, I would just second that, right? It's not just currently e-commerce. I mean, you take IT and IT services, which happened, 20 years ago or 15, 20 years ago. I think the Infosys of the world and the Wipros of the world created lots of wealth. And it's not just the founders, right? You're creating real job and wealth for, thousands and thousands of people. So I actually think it's the other way.
Yeah, and I would add to that upward social mobility as well. Not just economic, but social mobility as well. Okay, question from, yeah, go ahead.
I'm impressed by the dependence on mobile phones and all the wonderful things that are happening. I traveled to India frequently. I was there about 2 weeks ago. And through my 10 days there, I think there wasn't a single voice call I made on my Indian phone that was uninterrupted. There were many, many times where my Samsung Note 5 had barely 1G access. And I haven't heard any talk about what the telecom providers are going to do to actually bring the basic infrastructure up. It's all right to have 1 billion phones, but it really doesn't help if you can't use them.
It's true. What you are saying is at scale true. It's not anecdotally true. India, the 4G is 3G, 3G is 2G, 2G is 1G. We believe that if just the infrastructure improved, the e-commerce industry would just double overnight. Because people who are trying to recharge, 30% drop off because of a poor signal, and they're just trying to fuel their phones, right? Coming to the telco, I think the hyper competition that existed during the voice time actually caused a lot of people to not overinvest, and that's the value erosion. But if you look at the data thing, 3 telcos are currently contributing to close 80% market share. And I think with the advent of something like Jio coming in, which is going to happen in a few months' time, again, a new sort of revolution in terms of data speed and the price that you consume data is going to come in. One of the things that telcos did a mistake in India is they were not getting enough ARPUs, and they were charging a lot of money for accidental usage of internet, and that caused a huge fear psychosis in users. So I think real users are still 98% of this country is prepaid, right? Can you imagine the trust deficit we have as a society where I'm actually scared I am on a Vodafone roaming right now in US because last time I was here, the background services got me 1 GB downloaded, and I had a 2 lakh rupees bill in India.
Well, Vodafone's
right?
probably scared you're not going to pay the bill.
Maybe, yeah. So, so the thing is, we have some real challenges at telcos. I think they need to make money. They need to make money at scale, and I think data is going to be the new thing where talk time. I think one of the things about youth, they're speaking less and less on phone. One of the interesting things when a youth told me was that I asked, in the group discussion, we asked them that why don't you like to talk versus thing. He's like, when we are speaking on the phone, what do we do? There's nothing to look at.
My optical fiber to the buildings has been underrated in India, and there needs to be a lot more of that. You can't just carry everything over the cellular.
I think innovation that is happening now in terms of 4G and other services will probably surpass that. I think wired for the country and the infrastructure, we have just the permissions and getting stuff thing going. I think we are better off just kind of leapfrogging from some of these things.
Yeah. Yes.
So we've been talking a lot about how technology is an enabler for a lot of things, and also we've been talking a lot about how rural India is lacking a lot of things. So how do we bring technology there to enable them and solve problems for them? Like there's a huge gap. Someone doesn't have a mobile device or something in rural India, how do I empower them?
I'll try and answer that. I mean, I don't think there are easy answers. So, look, I mean, the fact of the matter is cell phone prices are dramatically coming down. What you got in an 8,000 rupee cell phone, what used to cost 25,000 is now available in an 8,000 rupee Moto G, right? And I think that'll become 4,000. So you'll be able to get a full smartphone at between 4,000 and 6,000. And you find that with prepaid, like Kunal was saying, you actually have the ability to get it in smaller chunks. So you actually becomes more affordable. I think there are a few things structurally that are happening. There is more now disposable income in several of these, in rural India. And I think it was historically very hard to get to it because of how distributed it was. I think most e-commerce firms have woken up to the fact that there is a fair amount of spending that actually happens. So we're exploring everything from sort of saying, can you create kiosks, right? To actually have people come in and be able to transact in remote villages, to basically saying, I think between all the e-commerce firms, there'll probably be between $3 and $4 billion invested in supply chain. So you can actually physically get stuff there as well. So all of these, I think, will start to help with enabling more of the rural economy, but I think it's a process. I do think it'll happen faster than we think, because there is actually both the demographic dividend of a lot of people living there, plus also having disposable income. And now with technology, the ability to sort of reach them. Distribution reach used to cost a lot of money. I mean, in the historical days of a Unilever sales guy sort of traveling around and making sure that he stocked each Kirana shop is very different from being able to shop and say, even with a bad connection. And therefore, lots of companies are investing behind it to see how can you get there fast.
Yeah, I just want to offer a slightly different perspective on this. I think in the rural areas, problems start with identity, right? And so the biggest technology project is Aadhaar, or the Unique Identity Project, which now has, I think, 900 million Indians on it. I mean, it is the largest database globally, right, for citizens. That's happened in an incredibly short period of time, enabled by technology. So once you have identity, you're on the grid, right? So I think that's critical. And then tied to identity is what the government is now enabling with, they've just introduced payment banks, which is the next step of saying if you have digital identity, then now there's payment banks and banking correspondence, which could be a little Kirana store in a rural area, but that is tied into the banking system. So banks don't need to have branches. So the next step after identity is financial inclusion. Again, that's going to be technology driven. So I think technology has a huge role to play, and I actually think the government has been very thoughtful in the building blocks between identity and financial inclusion to enable that.
Go ahead. Yes.
So, we seem to be talking about technology as synonymous with the internet or e-commerce. The problems of India are vast. Right? So how about nanotechnology, robotics, agribusiness? Can you guys comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to take a shot. So I think the last point I made was less about internet or commerce. It was how technology in that case can be used for really much more social inclusion. I think as it relates to some of the areas that you identified, to be honest, India is not emerging as a core, like if we think about phase one was IT services, and now phase two is around the kinds of technology we've discussed. there is still relatively limited commercialization of core technology in that market, including clean tech, right? I mean, one would have thought a country like that has all of these requirements should be an interesting market for technology innovation. It has not been. And so I will tell you that in robotics, there is some stuff happening. In drones, there is some stuff happening. But at the commercial level, we're not seeing a lot at all. I also don't think perhaps the pools of capital exist locally to understand those kinds of businesses. So that, for me, seems like it's going to need a catalyst that doesn't exist in the market yet.
I think just one sort of maybe a little bit of a tangential point is, I think in some fields you're seeing it. So I don't know if Preeta is here, but I think, healthcare, pharma are two areas where you're really starting to innovate, right? I mean, to take $1 billion to release a new drug versus what a Sun Pharma does. I mean, yes, it's generics, but, that I think is an innovation that is happening, and I think will continue to accelerate. The other is just healthcare, the cost of healthcare, and how do you actually innovate on that, right? Everything from, surgeries that cost, 1/10 or 1/20 or even 1/100th of what it would cost anywhere else. I think there's innovation happening. I think those are two. So if you just think about industries, I think, I agree with the point of fundamental research not moving on, but applied research in a few areas, I think healthcare being one of them, pharma being another, I think e-commerce being perhaps commerce itself being a third, auto as an industry. I think just look at the Tata Nano. Yes, it's not a commercial success, but if you look at the innovation that was done in terms of engineering to get it there, I think that was another area where I think you've truly innovated and things are actually being taken from India globally. So I think there are pockets of that. I think more can obviously happen, but product thinking and investments are the two big barriers. I think so. Beju, fully agree with that, right? So I think, but there are areas where it's starting to happen.
I also want to add that the government's 100 Smart Cities program, it has just begun. There is a fair amount of interest from MNCs to take part in that. And, the implementation of IoT systems is going to have to be geographically adapted to India's special unique needs. So I think that is going to create innovation in new areas that we haven't seen yet.
Do you think there's an opportunity there for folks who want to put capital in India in areas outside of sort of core internet, mobile commerce?
Yeah. Yes.
Somebody just talked about the need for capitalists for commercialization of technology. I would argue that a vast majority of technology that has been implemented in the West has been due to the regulatory environment, something that just doesn't exist in India. So you look at clean tech, you look at tire pressure sensors, and 100 other examples. I think it is up to the center, the government, to start and set up a regulatory environment that will necessitate the expansion of technology in these variety of areas, without which the private sector will only go to areas that are easy to reach and financially where they can succeed.
I actually disagree with that entirely. I think the government should stay as far away as possible. IT services didn't blossom into this massive industry because of the government. And the internet and what's happening in the startup economy isn't because of the government. And I don't think the reason these markets developed in the West is because of government. I think it's because there's significant addressable market size. And that is one of the issues in India. So if you take, for example, enterprise software, why is no one developing enterprise software for India? Because there's no market. Technology and PC penetration is so low to start with. So what are the companies that will adopt enterprise software? It's big MNCs and big banks. Well, they'll buy Oracle and Finacle and SAP. So I actually think it's more of a market size issue. And I think what you're seeing with what's happening in the internet economy is where there is an addressable market of scale. Entrepreneurs gravitate and capital gravitates. Yeah. Even when regulation does not permit it. What's happened in retail has happened, even though regulation did not permit it, because entrepreneurs found alternative structures that are legally compliant, right? So I guess that's my perspective.
So we'll take a couple of two more questions, and then we'll wrap. Go ahead. Yes.
So though India has a lot of e-commerce opportunities, but India's parallel economy is so strong that people don't hardly use credit card for online shopping. So that certainly increases the cost of online companies, right? Because you certainly cannot offer everything for cash on delivery services. So how are we going to overcome this problem in the coming years?
So I can start. I'm sure all of us have deeply felt perspectives, but okay.
How are you resolving with all your internet business, e-commerce business? Is it just targeting only the urban community, or is that reaching out to rural? If rural, how are you resolving the address issues, because it's not as good as in Western countries?
Yeah, sure. So I'll try and take both. So the answer on, at least from the e-commerce perspective, is there's a fair amount that happens in rural India. So between 55 and 60% of revenues come from rural India. I think your point of, cash on delivery and trust, I think it's a little bit of a trust issue, right? So, currently, I don't know about the other firms, but, ours, we have about 60% cash on delivery, which is insane. I mean, if you just think about it, 60%, right? Which is, everything. It's not only the problem of handling all that cash, but it is also a problem of, just tracking the customer. I mean, I've done a few deliveries, and what you find on cash on delivery is you send a package over, and the customer just says, I don't want it. I mean, there's no reason. It's not a size issue. It's not a fit issue. They just don't want it. So it's a huge problem. I think the way to get around it, I think there are no easy ways to do it, but I think the unified payment gateway that Nandan and a few others are doing, I think, mobile wallets, all of these technologies have to actually come in, and adoption has to increase. I think every e-commerce firm is trying to incentivize it because it's a huge cost to us. By the way, I think 30%, or I forget the exact statistic, between 20 and 30% payment gateway failures, it's a huge problem, right? And it's a problem, it's like your call drop problem. It's between a carrier and the bank and us, and you have to figure out what really happens and how many people retry. So I think these technologies, have to get better. And the reason for that, by the way, is we have among the most complicated systems, right? You need your OTP code, you need all of that to actually complete a transaction. So I think it's a combination of continuing to move on the technology, working on the trust of the customer, and actually simplifying payments. All have to come together. I think lots of us are working on it because it is a real cost to most of our businesses, and we need to solve it. And I think that would actually increase penetration greatly.
Okay, last.
Just a view on the payments, because I run a payments company. A behavior happens when motivation and ability both come together, right? 45% of railway tickets are booked online for the same customers who buy on cash on delivery. It is not true that they don't know how to pay online and other things, and inclusion is the thing. The problem is trust deficit. And I keep using this joke every time to explain the trust deficit problem. Even in Bollywood movies, when there is a scene of kidnap and ransom, they say, ek haath le, ek haath de. There is no such thing as keep it over here and I'll deliver the goods tomorrow. They said, no, we need to get the person who was kidnapped at the same time we give you cash. And it's unfortunate, but it's true. You don't see that in Western movies, but it's true in Indian movies, and it's the trust deficit thing. And cash on delivery is behaving in the same manner. A lot of people who are running this business on ground will tell you, interesting at FreeCharge, 100% of our transactions are digital payment through debit card and credit card. Same customers, when they transact on Snapdeal, that convert into COD customers. Same email address, same phone number. That's unique about India.
Okay, one last question. Okay, you go. Yes.
Hi, my name is Uday. My question is particular to Mr. Gautam Sinha. So what challenges do you face in taking services like...
Can you speak up? We can't hear you.
So what challenges do you face in taking services like Box TV to mass adoption? Do you have real problem with ISPs as well?
Yes. So video is a complex problem in India. And we had this problem not just with Box TV, but 4 years ago we did streaming for IPL. And that's where real-time video delivery to end users was very evident that you have to go through multiple hoops to... One of the things we had to do is just to drop ads, because ads were not really of the size while a lot of optimization happened in Player, we had to reduce the ad format so it can load instantly on a 2G connection speed, and this is 4 years ago. It's still not there to become a mass. So as Kunal was saying, 3G is 2G, and you still find a lot of difficulty in getting your quality of service right to the end user, and you continue to have this problem. So a lot of questions around infrastructure will actually enable this kind of thing.
So my question really was, is it because the subscribers are unwilling to pay for the service, or is it the technology gap that is?
It's actually both. So in India, consumer behavior is very different from the way it is in US, but infrastructure as a whole, especially for video, delivery is not up to the mark. So you see a lot of buffering. So if someone can store it on their device and then play it later, they still might use it. So it's not as convenient as you do it in US.
Okay, so we've got one last question. Preeta, again.
Thank you. We have an issue in our country about prescriptions and pharmacy retailing, and the government still doesn't have a proper law and legislation against it. And there's a possibility of, humongous misuse because, if you can just order prescriptions online, you never know what you order. And, do you have solutions? Do you have thoughts about it? Because the market is huge, but I don't think we have the right checks and balances yet. So, any thoughts?
I think that's true for any industry in India in terms of checks and balances not existing. I think the great thing about India is I think one incident kind of results in such massive thing. I think one case that happened is one seller listed something on Snapdeal and there was actually an FIR on Kunal Bahel and like the whole industry kind of took notice. So I think India operates on a little bit on extremes, right? I think the checks and balances don't come through necessarily always through government and regulation. And like Bejul said, it's actually good that they are staying away from it because usually that takes maybe 2 decades to kind of undo afterwards, right? Like payments is a classic example, right? The thing that we have to do right now is just kind of manage something around it, which is totally outdated in most cases. So I think...
Sorry, my point was that it's very convenient, if you want to reach the rural masses and you want to do stuff like that, and this is only for pharmacy and for drugs, it's extremely convenient, but what we don't have, which would happen in Europe or in the US or in Singapore, for example, is that, somebody can't just buy narcotics or ban drugs. While we don't have that system in place.
Actually, we do. You cannot do pharmacy. It means you don't see any e-commerce companies doing pharmacy yet.
But it's happening, and so I'm just throwing something controversial for discussion too.
No. Taking digital prescriptions and allowing some of that, are they completely watertight? I don't think so. And I think the framework will usually, I think the government has kind of always been sometimes reactive to some of these things because the innovation happens faster than government taking notice on some of these things. So it's definitely an open area that will be addressed, I think, very soon.
Well, we're going to wrap up with this. Thank you very much. You can see the panel has had a very optimistic view of the role of technology in India's transformation. I want to thank you. You have been a very dedicated audience, and I want to thank the panelists. So please join me in thanking.